this summer. We've gotten a lot of these, and Netflix is here bringing us the latest one called Dayshift. Now, Dayshift stars Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, Snoop Dogg, Megan Good, telling the story about Bud Jablonski, who is a pool cleaner during the day. But no, he's not a pool cleaner. In reality, Bud is actually a vampire hunter. And with his estranged wife, played by Megan Good, set to take their daughter all the way to Florida from the sunny days of LA, Bud only has a few days left to gather enough money to keep his wife and his kid here in California with him. But he's gonna have to kill a lot of vampires to do it. Yeah, so Dayshift. Saw this trailer, and right off the jump, I'm sure everybody else that saw it knew that this was clearly going to be something more of a comedic film for laughs than it was going to be on the horror side, which is okay, because when you see the trailer for Dayshift, you can tell right off the jump, the majority of this movie takes place during the day, which is incredibly unique for a vampire film. Now, it's not unique to see vampires out in the daylight. We know that's, their top weakness. You out in the daytime, burn. You're just dust at that point. And plenty of vampire movies out there have scenes or a good chunk of their movies set during the daytime as well too. But to have a movie basically predominantly set during the daytime that's a vampire film, that's pretty ballsy at that point, because then you have to wonder, what are we actually limited to? Like, things aren't that scary in the day. That's kind of a foregone conclusion. You really have to work on a horror film. You have to work really hard in order to keep that ambiance, to keep that feeling of dread and suspense and terror if it's going to be set during the daytime. And a lot of films do this really well, but Dayshift makes it clear right off the gate that, again, this is not going to be our typical scary movie. And I'm going to hit that super quick here for y'all. If you're looking for actual scares, if you're looking to be on the terrified side, this is not the film for you, and that's not a bad thing at all, because Dayshift is still actually really good. But if you're coming here looking for a scary vampire flick, something to get your spooky season started off with, this is not the one for it, okay? Again, majority of this film takes place during the day. And considering the story that we're kind of following, it doesn't really allow itself to lean into anything that could be remotely scary. And that's very much on purpose, because, yeah, you would call this a horror movie, but you're not really coming in this particular film to get scared at all. And the great thing is that the cast itself is just so good. I really enjoy the cast of this film, that you don't mind that you're missing a lot of those horror elements. And I say that as the beginning of the film is literally Jamie Foxx's Bud Jablonski going and killing two vampires in a really awesome fight. Now, some things that we're given right off the jump there is that a lot of the typical rules still apply. So obviously daylight is a big thing for these vampires, but you know what? I take that back. I said a lot of the typical things apply. I meant to say it's a lot of atypical stuff, because the only thing we are given like a for certain on is that daylight kills vampires. That's literally the only thing. Beyond that, the rest of the mythology, the rest of the rules don't really appear to be that concrete. For example, like the stake in the heart, or like stabbing something in the heart. Like on some vampires, it seems like it does that job, and then on some other vampires, it doesn't. Decapitation is typically what in any kind of movie. Even that, and I think that's honestly really good, because not that everything needs a franchise, not that everything needs to be fleshed out or anything, but because they were very loose with a lot of the rules surrounding the vampires in Dayshift, I feel that that allows for plenty of exploration were there to be a sequel, to where we could actually look deeper into what some of these more concrete rules about the vampires are. But love the design of them, because it was said that they used a lot of like circus performers for this, and that makes a lot of sense, because if you see them, the way that a lot of these vampires are moving, like they're all like bendy and foldy and doing yoga and shit like that. It's like, okay, cool. So y'all are contortionists and things. That's how you're moving the way that you are moving. And that's a really good spin to go with the vampires that you're representing. Not only that, but they make it very clear that there's a bit of a class system here with the vampires as well too. Like you have your, your elders, your super old vampires who are super fast and super strong, and then you have like your super young vampires who are like called zombie vamps. They can't process human blood because they were turned so young, so they have to eat animals and stuff. But they're more powerful, but they don't heal as well. And then there's uber vamps, and there's even more. And I love the fact that there's a class system of these vampires, depending on when you were bit, how you were bit, what kind of humans you're eating, what kind of other things you're eating. That really determines the type of vampire that you are. And I love that because we don't have to dive too deep into it. But they choose to make it a story point a little bit later on, and it works out really well. It never seems like, oh, you're going to confuse the audience talking about all these varied type of vampires. Now, again, the crux of the story here is that Bud Jablonski is he is an independent vampire hunter, and he lives he has this facade. His cover is that he's a pool cleaner, and he's not really providing the best that he can for his family. He's still there for his daughter, and him and his wife aren't divorced, but things obviously aren't as rosy. And we find out that his wife Jocelyn, played by Megan Good, has decided that she and her daughter are going to move to Florida for a bit more stability there with her mother, who lives down there. So Bud has this big task in front of him in just a few days to raise enough money to help things like tuition and braces, to show Jocelyn that he can actually be responsible. So it's kind of funny because the movie is absolutely one of like those 90s comedies to where it's like the dad's the bad guy basically, and he has to go and he has to actually go put in some work. He can't be a lazy asshole anymore. And it's not Mrs. Doubtfire. It's definitely not Mrs. Doubtfire, but it's kind of funny looking at this, like, this is the plot of like a 90s like kids movie. Like, Dad, when are we gonna be a family again? Well, son, when I kill all the vampires. When I get back to killing all the vampires, we can be a family again. And it's just kind of funny thinking that that's really what the fuck is going on in this movie. It's a 90s like family comedy, honestly. But so in order to make money, Bud, who has been he's been kicked out of the Union, which is the big corporation that's responsible for vampire hunting worldwide, matter of fact, as it's pointed out that they have plenty of people overseas as well too. But basically, the Union is this company that employs hunters to go and kill vampires, and they have plenty of hunters, but considering they are a corporation, they have all these rules and regulations, and Bud doesn't do well with rules and regulations and has been kicked out numerous times before. But because he's desperate and needs to make some money, he calls on his friend Big John, played by Snoop Dogg, to back him to get back into the Union so he has a chance of making enough money to save his family. And because of this, he is paired up with Seth, played by Dave Franco, who is a desk agent who is finally getting his first assignment out in the field. So right off the jump there, you know who's in this film. You got Jamie Foxx, you got Dave Franco, you got Snoop Dogg, you got Megan Good. So a lot of names that you know, and not so many who typically do a lot of these kind of films. So it's putting them in a really, really good element. Now, Dave Franco, right at home, because obviously if you remember the Fright Night remake, the amazing Fright Night remake, and he didn't get a lot to do in that movie. As good as it is, he didn't really get a lot to do because this was still kind of earlier on in his career. So now that he's been around for about a decade or so at this point, maybe a little bit longer, I love that he kind of gets to revisit some of these, not roles, but some of these genres and specific situations that like the characters he plays have been tossed into, but he gets to do it a little bit differently. And Dave Franco is just phenomenal. He's absolutely hilarious in this movie, and that's great because Jamie Foxx is usually like the guy that's carrying all the comedic weight of most of the movies that he's in. And even in like the action films that Jamie Foxx does, he still manages to bring that comedic element to those movies. But he's basically the straight man in this film, whereas Dave Franco is the comedic talent in it. And they work so well together because Jamie Foxx is still hilarious in the movie, but the two of them like have a great banter throughout it. And as Jamie Foxx, yeah, like he's not necessarily lazy, but like he's the guy who's actually going out there and doing all of this work. He knows what it's really like to actually go and hunt vampires. And Dave Franco's character is very much by the book. You can't do this. We have to do this. We have to do that. And it's a learning experience, obviously, through the movie because it's a bit of a buddy cop film as well, to where Jamie Foxx is trying to show Dave Franco this is the way that the world really works when you're out hunting vampires. And at the same time, Jamie Foxx is still picking up a lot from Dave Franco as well too, because he realizes that he's going to take care of his family. If he's going to like make this a real honest to God try of getting back with the Union, he's got to put in the work with that as well. And you see as the movie keeps going on that he's picking up some of the stuff that Dave Franco's putting out there. He's being a little bit more cautious about things, and that's great to see. And it would be remiss of me to not mention that the director of this film, J.J. Perry. Now, when I was looking up this film, I was like, wait a minute, why does that name sound so familiar? Like, I should absolutely know who J.J. Perry is. Like, this guy's like a famous director or writer or something. And a lot of you are actually going to know who the fuck J.J. Perry is, because you have absolutely seen J.J. Perry on screen before. Maybe you saw him in a little film called Mortal Kombat, where he played the stunt double for Johnny Cage. Or maybe you saw him in the sequel to that, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, where he played Cyrax and Scorpion and Noob Saibot. He literally was like everybody in Mortal Kombat. He was on the Mortal Kombat Conquest TV show as Sub-Zero, which I actually remember that episode because that's the one where he's training and he has to go fight Scorpion and Kung Lao, and love that shit. But he's been in a lot, y'all. He's been in some Walker, Texas Ranger. He was in Iron Man. He was in Pineapple Express, funny enough, with James Franco. He's been in Paranormal Activity. He's been in Django Unchained. He's been in Total Recall. Like, the man has been in so much as a stuntman, and this was his directorial debut, and you can definitely see his influence throughout the film, because the movie itself, not necessarily big on the martial art aspect of it, though Scott Adkins, who you might know as another very famous stuntman and martial artist out there, who's done quite a lot of films in the last 15 years, there are a lot of really great scenes in the film, with great fight scenes. And again, the martial arts maybe not so much, but we do get this really awesome scene to where Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, and then the Nazarian brothers, who are played by Steve Howey, who you might know from Shameless, as well as Scott Adkins, who you might know from a bunch of other shit as a stuntman, including playing Deadpool or Weapon 11, in X-Men Origins Wolverine. This great scene where they're clearing out a hive inside this house, and Scott Adkins being the martial artist doing all this cool ass shit throughout it there, which, by the way, that scene so badass. Now, if you want to see a very cool scene with a bunch of hunters just like killing all of these vampires in a variety of different ways, you have got to check that specific scene out. Clearly, having a stuntman who knows his shit direct a film where we're gonna have some big action scenes, that's the right way to go. Honestly, and it's funny because there's a bit of a John Wick vibe to a lot of the fights that go on, and that's interesting because the producer of this, Chad Stahelski, one of the producers, is the John Wick guy, the guy who made and created the John Wick series, and so there's clearly a bit of an influence from that as well too. Now, again, not anything really to talk to here with the scares or anything. This is a bloody film. This is absolutely a bloody film. They do not skip on the gore, the blood, the killing, the violence. That is all there in force, and they do such an awesome job with it because it is over the top in a lot of places, but at the same time, it very much fits the stylized world that we're in with Dayshift. There's some vibes for sure of John Carpenter's Vampires in here, because if you ever seen John Carpenter's Vampires, one of my absolute favorite vampire films, the film is basically about James Wood leading this team of hunters that goes out and clears out vampire nests. And that's the film. It's just them basically trying to clear out these nests. They make the wrong vampire mad, and then they get targeted for revenge. And it's interesting because you can absolutely feel some of that influence as well too with this movie, but I guess just on a bit of it's weird because John Carpenter's Vampires is as grand of a scale as it can be. Like, they deal with the Pope and they deal with cardinals and things like that, and international crosses going from here to here. But even with that, Dayshift still feels a bit of like a bigger world that's going on. So just interesting seeing a lot of these influences from films like that and John Wick and all these other ones out there. But even with all of it, it's a really great film because at the end of the day, it's still not that much of a vampire movie. earlier on in the film, Dave Franco and Jamie Foxx's characters having a conversation about this El Jefe, who's supposed to be this big vampire out there, who's possibly in charge of the drug trade in LA and everything, but we don't really ever follow up on that. Like, he gets mentioned, but it never gets brought up again. And our big bad of the film, Audrey San Fernando, who is a real estate agent in the Valley, who is actually a vampire elder, is basically trying to like buy all this real estate up and sell it to vampires so they can re-infiltrate and take over the entire Valley. And it's like, that's great, but we don't really see a lot of that in the movie. Like, she says that's her plan, but the only time that really works out is that she's trying to get Megan Good's house, and that's kind of the crux of them moving to Florida, is that they're going to sell the house. But which brings up another interesting point. There's not much of the way of civilians in this film. Everybody is either basically a vampire, they're a familiar, which is a human that serves a vampire, or they're in the Union. Outside of Megan Good's character, and then Zion Broadnax's character, who plays Paige, Bud and Jocelyn's daughter. Besides them, there's not really any civilians. Like, Paige goes to this birthday party, and like there's other people at the birthday party, but they're in there for just a few seconds. Everybody else in this movie is basically like in the actual war that's going on. I just found that incredibly interesting, because that kind of means that Paige and Jocelyn work as our eyes, as they're the only people kind of removed from everything that's going on. But I say all of that to say that there's a lot of meat left on this bone. And I said earlier on that not everything needs a sequel, but what's interesting is the fact that we don't follow up on the El Jefe. We don't follow up on Audrey San Fernando's plan to infiltrate the Valley with more vampires. We don't follow up more on just like are vampires actually well known to civilians out there, because Megan Good's character didn't know about that at all. So how well do people know vampires? There's a lot of meat on this bone. Even Jamie Foxx's character has this grenade that he's showing off to Dave Franco's character that's going to do all these things, and he never gets to use it. So I feel like we set all of these like loose threads in this film that if it gets a sequel, we're going to get to follow up on. So I really actually want a sequel to this movie, because there's a lot of cool shit that got alluded to that we just never got a chance to see. So let's hope we can get a sequel out of this at one point or another. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. Let me be clear about this. This is not going to reinvent the wheel and be like, oh my God, like this is just like the best vampire movie. It's really, really good. And there's some cute nods, like I said, to a lot of other really good vampire movies out there, including the very end, which is like a direct nod to the Lost Boys, which I absolutely fucking love. But this is not going to reinvent the wheel for you, but it's going to be a very different kind of vampire movie to show. This, I would almost say, even with the language, the gore, and the violence, is probably more of an appropriate like vampire movie to show off to a younger audience than like a lot of our old school ones that we will watch, just because of the fact that it's over the top, it doesn't take itself seriously, and still, it's kind of stylized like a family comedy from the 90s. So check it out if you have the chance to. Again, this is Dayshift. It's on Netflix, so it's free to stream. Check it out, y'all. Hey everybody, I appreciate you checking out this video, whether it was a review, whether it was a new episode, whether it was an unboxing, an interview, or whatever else. I want to remind you can check out my separate reviews also on my YouTube page, and new full episodes go up every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and on your favorite podcasting platforms at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.